What's something nice that a teacher has done for you? On the last day of school I was helping my art teacher clean up for the summer. She knew I was rather poor growing up, so she gave me all the leftover paper, some really high-quality Bristol board and watercolor paper, all of the leftover Prismacolor pencils, tons of paint brushes, and other various art supplies. It was her last year teaching and she didn't care to save the stuff for the next year. She said the school buys all that stuff new every year. I still miss her. She was the best teacher I've ever had. Just the other day I tried to buy a bottle of water and didn't have enough money. The teacher noticed, passed me the bottle he just bought and bought another. Wasn't even my teacher. I don't even know what he teaches. Hydration is the way to go. My English teacher when I was very, very young. She was the sweetest I've ever had. She knew I loved Harry Potter books. They were not super popular in France back then, and she did bring me HP-themed coloring books from her trip to England. It made me so happy that she thought about me even though she was away from school. It's been more than 20 years and we're still writing letters to each other. Smile. That's amazing. Are you still into HP? My teacher in 5th grade gave me a USB flash drive with math games. Yay! Were they as good as cool math games? Nah, Italian version basically. Back in grade 10, I was walking back to school alone at the end of the lunch period. One of my teachers just happened to turn a corner and wind up walking directly next to me on the way back to school. We had a nice 12 seconds conversation before realizing that we were going to have to walk for at least 10 minutes in the most painfully awkward silence that's ever existed because I'm awful and can't hold a conversation to save my life. She instead said, well, see, and power walked the entire way there, so she was constantly just out of acceptable talking range for the entire walk. Woman was a hero. In 9th grade, one of our classes had us shadow someone in a job field that we were interested in. I can't remember what it was that I was interested in, but my mom, for some goddamn stupid reason, she never made any sense to me, absolutely refused. I told my teacher for that class. He took me aside in the hallway and told me, I know you're not bullshitting me on this, I understand, so I'm going to give you an 85 for this and we'll call it good. Mr. Ural, you're a hell of a teacher wherever you are. Almost 20 years later I can't remember what job I was interested in, but I remember the teacher. One of my teachers wrote my college recommendation letters and helped me through most of the process. One of my really good friends got his AP English teacher with a Ph.D. to help write his college application essays and a letter of recommendation. The kid was already pretty smart and had good grades, but I think that little extra help from the teacher was what helped him get into most of his top schools. Just goes to show how far being nice to your teachers can go. I was failing school hard a few years ago because I've always had motivation problems, and just never did any homework. A few teachers really stuck by me and encouraged me for a long time, and weren't afraid to kick my ass if I was being an idiot. I ended up passing the year. That's what teachers should do. As a teacher, I agree. But then give teachers 5 classes of 25 to 30 kids each with no extra paper head, and my priorities quickly turned to focusing on the ones who actually show up and care. There's simply not enough time to devote to those who need the extra push. Visited me when I was in the hospital. Held me when I cried at a former teacher's funeral. Gave me food like every morning when I forgot to eat breakfast. Seriously, visit them. They want to know how you are doing. Making me to sit next to my school crush. What happened next? Jizzed in my pants. When I was stressed about an exam, the teacher said to me, you're a strong, independent woman and you don't need no man. I am male. You go, girl. Girl power. When I told my SAT prep teacher how well I did on the SATs, the pure look of excitement and happiness he showed was probably the nicest thing I ever got from a teacher. It felt really good to know that a teacher could be that happy for a student and proud to see his work pay off. I've had a similar experience. One of my teachers cried when I did well on a test. It really shows you how much some teachers care. As a junior in high school I went through a nasty breakup. The girl I had been seeing decided to make it a rather public affair. I guess she had a knack for extravagance. The whole ordeal was a nightmare. Duckers I didn't know wanted to talk shit, people I did know treated me differently, and friends with good intentions were so hell-bent on telling me how awful she was that it got rather uncomfortable. My English teacher was the only person who handled it well. She was great, I really respected her, and we got along. See, My expired squeezes expos was so widely talked about that every teacher in the school knew. And I knew they knew, which was downright shitty. My English teacher asked me to stay after the class. She waited till everyone had walked out of the room, then turned to me. "Girls your age are the worst," she stated, "but 10 years from now, that girl is going to look back at you as the best relationship she ever had. And girls better than her will be hoping you notice them." It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to me. Honestly, those few seconds turned my whole sour attitude around. After that, I didn't give a duck what my peers had to say about my relationships. In all fairness, we're more than a decade out and that teacher was dead wrong. But she meant well, and in that moment she did make a huge difference for me. Wrote me a scholarship recommendation in which he said that no matter how bad his day or week had been, I managed to cheer him up, and that he missed my quiet resolve to excel. 20 years later, I still have a copy of the letter, and now it brightens my day whenever I think about it. I posted this in another thread recently, but it definitely applies. When I was in the 2nd grade, we had this poetry writing assignment that our teacher ended up putting together into a little class booklet. I wrote a couple of poems, but one of them called "There's a Bear in My Hair" really caught my teacher's attention. He pulled me aside after class one day and told me that he really liked it and wanted to enter it into this national poetry competition where it could end up in a book and I could get some scholarship money for college. It didn't win, but having a teacher compliment my writing and encourage me like that was a huge push for me wanting to become a writer. Here's the poem. In case anyone wants to read it. It's pretty dumb and weird, but I still think it's kind of cool to this day. Was late 5 minutes for a test. The teacher gave me a 5 minutes extension afterwards. Wasn't expecting that and I did manage to complete it before then, but the extra time allowed me to check my answers. I went to a very small school with a bunch of really amazing math teachers and one really shitty math teacher tried to sue a kid for aggressively swinging his backpack at her when she threw him out of the classroom for something trivial. He had picked up his backpack in a normal manner. I was slated to have pre-calc with the terrible teacher the following year and was complaining to my amazing math teacher how much I was dreading her class. So my amazing math teacher offered to teach me pre-calc over the summer so I could skip a year of math and go straight to calc with the amazing teacher. So once a week each week over the summer I met my amazing teacher in her back garden where we had tea and cookies and she taught me pre-calc. A week before school started I met with shitty teacher and took her pre-calc final, aced it, and got to stick with amazing teacher. I also napped at my English teacher's house once. I was running myself ragged with AP classes, school play, at PT job, so she let me nap in her spare room between classes. Didn't hand in my term paper. Was projected to fail. He not only let me pass, but he gave me an A. Like why? It's not impossible he thought he lost your paper and just gave you an A to escape the hassle of getting you to hand it in. Or he felt pity for you. Pity. I told him I didn't do it before he graded it. One of my teachers literally went in a dumpster to get back my test that she accidentally threw away. That was really nice of her. One of my teachers refused to increase my marks, despite it being correct, because how else would I learn? I hated him. After I achieved some success as an adult, won a few awards, was on a cover of a magazine and appeared on national TV, none of those things mattered to me as much as the letter I got from Mrs. Faulkner, my 2nd grade teacher. She wrote to me to tell me how proud of me she was and included a couple memories of having me in her class more than 30 years ago. I'd like to solve this game of Guess Who? Are you Michael Strahan? Oh, no, I'm not famous or anything. Just have had some success with my career. I'm a comedian and magician. My 5th grade teacher was asking us for homework and I didn't have mine, so he grabbed me, lifted me by my armpits, and cleaned the whiteboard with me. After he was done he said no worries about the homework. My 6th grade science teacher picked me up, set me in an empty recycling bin, and wheeled me out on a cart to the adjacent science teacher's room because I was talking during a movie. To be fair, he was very clear that if I talked again, he would send me to the other room in a trash bin on a cart. I lost my science book. The rule was if you lost your book, you had to pay for it. I really couldn't afford it. Teacher just sort of made the issue go away. Thanks Helen M. wherever you are. There's a good chance she paid for it with her own money. My awesome math teacher bought me a GameCube after hearing me talk about how I was missing a GameCube from my collection. He gave it to me at my graduation and I cried. Bought me a backpack because I didn't have one. One day the chain of my bike broke and my mom brought me to school. At the end of the day the last lesson was cancelled and we could go home 2 hours earlier. I tried to call my mom to come pick me up, but she did not respond. One of my teachers saw me sitting outside by the gate and asked what I was doing there. I explained the situation and she offered me a ride home, because she lived in the same town as I did. I accepted, of course, and didn't have to wait for 2 hours. Ran into one of my grade school teachers several years after graduation. I asked her what was going on with her and she told me she had a son. And named him after me. Wow. I named him after his father Forrest. Know me, but a group of teachers did the right thing. In high school there was one girl that was that girl. Not too bright, but sweet, poor, dressed badly and messy, sometimes smelly. The one many people picked on. As a practical joke, her class decided to vote her to be on a homecoming maid for homecoming ceremonies. It was a really cruel thing to do. A group of teachers got together, got her fitted for a dress, all the dressings and got her hair done and ensured she had the nicest convertible car to ride in during the parade. She ended up having a blast. Kudos to the teachers. I lost a Pokémon card in kindergarten, and was super upset. My teacher moved an entire shelf, it pretty much made up a wall, just to get my Pokémon card, blanking on the name. Shoot, edit, Miss Magus. That's a cool Pokémon. Ghost/Psychic? Something like that? That's a cool Pokémon. Ghost/Psychic? Miss Magus is pure ghost. She's based on witches. My third grade teacher Mrs. Hunsaker was the first person to notice that I was washing my hands a few times every hour and that my OCD was getting out of control, causing my hands to crack so bad from the frequent washing that my knuckles were bleeding. She put a bottle of lotion next to the sink in the classroom so I could put lotion on my hands after washing and help prevent the dryness. She did countless other nice things, but this one sticks out because it was the first time that I realized what I was doing wasn't normal, and the way she addressed it and other issues I had that no one at home was noticing at the time was phenomenal. I've got a good story for this thread, though the memories are super foggy so I might forget something. When I was a sophomore in high school there was a guy who had a crush on me or something like that. He was very stalker-y and although he never followed me home or anything at school he followed me around constantly. Like waiting outside of classrooms I was retaking tests in and stuff like that. He would find me no matter where on campus I went. One time while I was eating lunch he put his hand under my skirt and tried to touch me under it. I wasn't confident enough at the time to freak out or tell anyone, so I just immediately got up and ran away to hide the fact that I was crying. Students weren't allowed to leave the courtyard cafeteria area during lunch. We had an especially long lunch at that school, like an hour, unless doing something school related. I knew he would come and find me again anywhere I went that he was allowed to go, so I went into the main halls and tried to avoid security guards and whatnot so no one would send me back. Eventually I ended up in my chemistry teacher's classroom, and I asked her if I could eat lunch with her. She was going to say no, but I think she saw that I had been crying because she hesitated and said I could. At one point, that guy came by and looked in the door and saw me, and started to come over to sit down next to me. My teacher looked at him and then looked at me and I'm sure I must have looked shell-shocked because she immediately told him to leave because only school-related stuff was allowed in the classrooms during lunch. He started to question why I was there, and she told him I was actually waiting on her to finish her lunch because I had promised to help her clean up the lab that day or something like that. I ate in that classroom nearly every day for the rest of the time I was at that school, which, to be fair with how turbulent my home life was not very long. Occasionally that guy would come by and look in a window at me and try to get me to come out, but I would just look at my chemistry teacher and she would walk over and tell him to leave because he was distracting me from our very important school discussions. I am autistic and when I was younger I would ramble for hours to anyone who would listen just talking about astrophysics because I found it fascinating. I hope she realized how big of a difference she made for me. I had a difficult home life, a self-harm problem, and a lot of complex issues that were not being handled properly by the people in my life. It isn't hyperbole to say she saved my life. My grandpa was always really eager to encourage my curiosity so I grew up with kids' encyclopedias, books to read, simple math to solve. This put me unnaturally ahead of the other kids in elementary school. So I would get bored and misbehave. Being picked on for it didn't really help much. All throughout school I could tell the teachers and other kids hated me. But when I was in grade 5 I was in a grade 5/6 split class. That teacher was super nice to me and very attentive. The best thing he did though was let me do the work for the grade 6 part of the class if I finished the grade 5 work first. He also encouraged me to do the reading thing with kindergarten kids, and doing that made me feel like I had some worth. It was probably the first time I ever felt comfortable in a class and accepted as well. I'm of average knowledge/skill these days, but the differences when you're a kid can be pretty big, and it's a very nice thing to take the time to handle kids on a case-by-case basis. For most of my years in school I wasn't a very good student. I lacked self-esteem, didn't do homework, fell asleep often, and smiled my way out of having to admit to anyone I was having a hard time and felt horrible. I got fly under the radar of distressed kid because I participated often and apparently had good answers and raised good questions. In 9th grade, there was a single teacher who saw me as something other than lazy or stupid. She was my English and literature teacher. She noticed I would draw comics and monsters in my notebooks during discussions and often asked me after class what book I was reading, would suggest others, and gave me extra credit assignments where she challenged me to write a short story based on a prompt or give an analysis on a character in one of the books we read. At the end of the year, I had the highest grade in the class, my only A in any class, and she told me the school was letting her go because they didn't appreciate her teaching methods. She said she was going to try and be an author and told me that I had the creativity and talent to do the same, even more so. She was awesome and is what inspired me to pursue a career as a writer. TLDR, cool teacher encouraged me to pursue creative writing when most others thought I was useless. Thanks for listening to another episode of Reddit X. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any stories. Feel free to share your own stories below in the comments. Have a good day.